everybody's got the material in front of them? There you go. Oh, you brought the Haggadah. Good. Did anybody else bring out Haggadah? Well, so tell us about this Haggadah. Hold it up so everybody can see on the Zoom.
Red yellow Haggadah, it's our favorite.
Right.
And when we read it, I swear I hear my father's voice. So this is the one my dad always used. And you can tell where he was doing the hello sandwich and washing hands and it's.
Don't ever get rid of it.
Oh, no.
Hand it down from generation to
We
generation.
had a second one and I said, I'm not using Zayden's. So,
Is the other one smaller? Because I had a smaller one. That's a bigger version. Oh, that's the leader
This is
one.
my father, yes, this is.
Give it around, everybody. Good evening. Hello. Hi, that's great.
Right.
Wonderful. So give us one favorite memory from Zadie at the Seder.
Yeah, no patience. No patience. When we first, my oldest recollection is, he wouldn't go around the table, he read everything himself. But then once my aunt once said, that's all reading, and he said, okay.
That's called egalitarian is.
Yeah. But, the thing that I hear him most is, we would read it in English. In the hills, like lambs, whatever, right, it's the hollow part, yeah, and I just hear semi-red focus.
Yeah, that was good line.
And I would be so excited when it comes to me, it's I get to read it, but it was his voice that I hear. And my sister said the same thing, we had AI last year, first night, we all hated it, and like, we don't hear saying nothing, we switched back to the running now.
It's interesting, you say red million helps you hear, isn't that interesting? It's something, it's what we call synesthesia, it's the mixing of your senses, right? The seeing of something helps you think about something that you heard. It's an amazing thing. Right? It really is. Which Haggadah did you bring, or Haggadot did you bring?
I want several, but I want to say something about this one.
Yeah,
I used to work at the Jewish Studies Library.
yeah.
We had a record, that we played on the record player of the Haggadah, the whole Haggadah with melodies, beautiful melodies. I took it home, taped it on a cassette, and my kids know, my three kids know the melodies.
Because of that. By
Because
the way, no records, no cassettes anymore.
beautiful melodies, when we do sing them. We say that sometimes we rush and we skip, but we remember those melodies. Now, though this one is non-Zion, we don't use it, but I have it.
He's wonderful, though, too. Beautiful Haggadah.
And I have here, I thought I'll send it around, because this is a print of the Venice Haggadah.
Oh, wow.
It's a print out, but
Right.
yeah. And this one is Moshe Bamberger Haggadah, which was the first print, it was printed in 1772.
Wow.
So I thought I'd send it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Anybody else break? Excuse me, a Haggadah in a row? No, nobody else. Ooh, is it? Must be true. So I mentioned last time we were together that one of our minhagim, one of our customs is that everybody has one standard Haggadah that everybody has, and then we have a second Haggadah that everybody chooses from our vast collection. We must have 100 or more Haggadot. So we put out the regular standard one, like this white one, not this one. We happen to use one of the versions of Noam Sion Haggadah that he did for the Hartman. So not like that one, it's a little different. And then everybody chooses one. And so during the course of the evening, you can say, oh, how come you have that version and I have this version? And sometimes they're different because the Sephardic Haggadah is different than the Ashkenazi Haggadah, is different than the Yemenite Haggadah, is different than the Reform Haggadah, different than the Conservative Haggadah. It depends where you come from in the world. And so we share a lot of ideas, and of course, all the commentaries make it so rich as well. So let's go back to the ranch and get some studying done today. Last time we were together, I mentioned that you start the Haggadah, and we do what everybody said, I hope, with the what? How do you start the Haggadah usually? What did we do last time? don't remember it, so hold on. Yeah, we sang Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but we sang Twinkle Twinkle Little Star because it was a way in which to remember the order of the seder. Seder means order, right? Kadesh Mordechai Karpas Yaman Lavi Drota Motzi Matzamano Kodesh Shulchan Order Tzapun Baret Halen Yirtza la 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 la, right? And I suggested that's one of the ways in which to engage people in seder experience. For kids, it's wonderful to hear that. For adults, it's cute to hear that. But it also helps us, right, remember what it is that we're doing. And of course, there's supposed to be some kind of seder to the seder. There's supposed to be an order to the seder. That doesn't mean it always works that way. It's very often completely out of order. It also sometimes gets a little bit unruly, right? There are always people with different agendas that are around the table. Some want to sing, most want to eat, some want to get done, some want to go long, right? There are always people with different agendas, and that sort of makes the seder experience wonderful. The 4 children, which of course are an aspect of this Haggadah experience or this Pesach experience, are there to serve as paradigms. It's not an exhaustive paradigm. There are different typologies, right, of people who come to the Seder, and people are looking for different kinds of things. So just quickly, what are you looking for when you go to a Seder? Don't think too much. What are you looking for? The Afikomen, good. What prizes? Good, okay, good.
Different aspects that you can.
Yeah, you want something new, something chadash. You want to come with a chiddush, as they say in Yiddish. You want something you haven't heard before. Especially if you go to a seder with people who are educated, who walk away and say, "Wow, I want to remember that for next year." Or isn't that interesting? It changes the way in which I look at the seder at Passover, or even my life. There are things that happen at Pesach that can change your life. If really the seder is about liberation and freeing you from the shackles of the way in which you used to be, right? Then Pesach can be a completely liberating kind of experience. It can be a mind-blowing and a mind-altering experience as well. P.S. Okay, we mentioned this last time a little bit, but I want to go a little bit further with it. Right? The Haggadah or the Seder experience happens on a wide variety of levels. Right? It happens on the level of what? The words, right? Then it happens on the level of the story, yeah. So it's you see, you hear. What about the Seder plate, right? You see it, the symbols that are there. You also taste, you imbibe, right? You hear, you see, and you smell. You can't help but the smells of, by the way, smells are strongest sense, they say. So when you smell the chicken soup, that is the same recipe, maybe that you've used for many years, or when your children smell it, and they say, "Oh, I smell Baba." I hear that all the time. Or I smell Abba, or I smell, right, the smells and sights and sounds. And by the way, there's also a kinesthetic element to it. Not that we're so at our Seder tables so kinesthetic, but there should be a kinesthetic element, right? If you're singing Dayenu, why are we singing Dayenu? When do you sing Dayenu? And we cross the Red Sea, Dayenu. So what should you do? Get up, right? And march around, right? Think about it. Or when you're doing some element of the B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim in the Hallel, when the Israelites left, right? B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim. It's a marching song, right? And you gotta have that kind of cadence and rhythm so that the experience still seems somewhat variegated. And by the way, when you sing Eliyahu Hanavi, what do? You get up and you open the door, right? And you sway, and by then you've had at least 3 cups of wine, so you're into swaying a little bit more than you were for the first cup, okay? Hopefully. And P.S., don't underestimate that element of being a little bit shaker, a little bit liquored, as they used to say. I come from Canada, we used to say, a little bit liquored is not a terrible thing. Why? What does it do?
Boosts you up to understand.
Right. By the way, if you move into the realm of the mythic, right? It's easier to be in the realm of the mythic when you're a little drunk. It makes it a lot more sense to you. You're a little more open. You're sort of, I don't know, open to the possibility of thinking in ways that you otherwise wouldn't do so. I don't mean it in a dangerous way. But sometimes it lowers your inhibitions. A little drink calms you down, calms the nerves. You're not so nervous or worried about what other people are saying or thinking, or you just sort of open yourself up. You feel a little warm inside or more open inside. There's an element of that at the center, and it is such a brilliant organizing principle. It really is. It really is. to talk about the ways in which we can experience this salvation or this liberation on multiple levels. Last thing I mentioned, then we get down to today's material, right? How many sections are there in the Haggadah? 14 or 15, good student, you remember. Why 14? Why would you have 14? 14 is the letters Yud and Dalet in Hebrew. 10 and 4 spells Yad. What do we know about a hand? It's with God's mighty outstretched hand that God delivered the children of Israel. Yad chazaka uvizroa netuya. That's the quote. Okay? Yad chazaka. So Yad. Why 15? 15 spells Yah, which is a name for God. Hallelujah. You should praise Yah. It's another name for God. So it is God's outstretched hand that we see, right, manifest in the Seder experience in Yetziat Mitzrayim, in the Exodus from Egypt. And that's what we're supposed to see here. We're supposed to feel and experience the notion of liberation, not catalyzed by our own power. Remember what it says in the Haggadah? I don't know if you get to this part. Lo al yedei malach, velo al yedei saraf. It doesn't happen by virtue of a angel or a seraph or any of these angelic beings, but rather, and by the way, not even by the hand of Moses. By the way, anybody notice who's missing in the Haggadah? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses isn't there. Right now, the Sephardic Haggadah has some mention. And some of the Haggadot that are around this table have one mention of Moshe, but Moses is sort of the unsung hero of all of this. And you can't, I challenge you to find it, right? And I know not in some English translation somewhere, but in the original Haggadah itself. Why did they leave Moses out? Why not include him? Why? Really why? I wasn't asking for jokes, like not for giggles and chuckles. Why is he left out? Okay, so one answer is what? About God. It's all about God, right? And nobody has primacy of place other than the Almighty. Okay? And we had a great worry as a people that what would happen to Moses? What happens to great spiritual leaders and other religious traditions? We deify them, we turn them into demigods. Right? Think about it. We don't have to look around too far. There are lots of people who turn their great heroes and heroines into folks that we worship. So we're very careful about it. So there's that element of not trying to diminish God's role in the Haggadah by overplaying Moses. And by the way, notice there's something else about Moses. Nobody knows where Moses is buried. For the same reason, it doesn't turn into a place for pilgrimage, even though, by the way, lots of people think they found Mount Sinai in the Sinai Desert. This is where Moses probably was laid to rest. Your travel person will tell you that, you know. I gotta tell you, I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. And there's something about that mystery that's really important. And so a little bit of mystery is also part of this. You don't see Moses. And so some kids should ask during the Fear Conscious, during the 4 questions, Sadie, Efo Moshe Rabbeinu, where is Moses? Right? And we talk about Moses all the time, and yet there is no Moses mentioned here.
So I get why with Moses, the Bible being the ultimate importance, some sense. Why is it that we know where Abraham and the other patriarchs and patriarchs are buried?
Yeah.
Why did we not have that disguised as well?
So I would say to you the following. First of all, the trick only works once. And you have to make a choice of whose kunz you want to have. In other words, who do you want to use for all of this? P.S. There's no a biblical verse that says that. Right? Nobody knew the place of Moses buried. So we're feeding off what the text says. It didn't say nobody ever looks for it. I mean, we have the Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? We could have done a movie of searching for Moses' tomb. And there are people who suggested that. But I think you can only use this one time. It has to be with the most mighty of all characters, the most consequential. And by the way, there's only one teacher called Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, right? Not Abraham Avinu and Yitzhak Avinu and Yaakov Avinu. We have a lot of Avinus, right? We have Imenus, we have mothers as well. But there's only one who's Rabbeinu. There's something very different about being Rabbeinu, our teacher, than being our friend, our parent, an important person. Think about it in your lifetime, right? What would you really call your teacher? right? Who is your Rob, your real educator, the person who is your real role model? For some of us are very lucky to have several of them. But if you have to choose one individual who you really hold with the greatest esteem, who changed your life, who set you on your path, it's generally speaking not a lot. And if you have one, you're lucky. If you have multiple, you're really. And the truth is that, as we think about this kind of stuff, we try not to venerate people in the same kind of way. Jewish tradition was really worried about veneration because we saw so many traditions that venerated individuals and followed individuals. Right? Think about all the false messiahs that our people experience. Shabtai Tzvi, right? Just look that one up on Google. Right? And that whole movement was unbelievable. And the things that happened in the name of that leader, the kinds of depraved behavior that we saw led our people in directions that are just unbelievable. P.S. We're not the only people in the world who have these challenges, right? Remember Jonestown? We are old enough to talk about those kinds of things. These things happen in the world around us in really powerful ways, really hurtful ways, really destructive ways. How about all those people who followed teachers who ended up being abusive individuals? We have experiences in our own frame of reference within every community that we've ever been in. Okay, I don't want to hold people to levels of perfection, so I'm no perfect guy. But how many people were led astray by charismatic teachers over the course of time who led us in directions that weren't healthy for ourselves, for our communities? And this is something we have to think about. And so they were very worried about Moses becoming this iconic figure, but not such only an iconic figure. Iconic is okay, but becoming an idol, really being called instead of that. And so the tradition was very worried about all that. And it's, I think, an important conversation to have around the table, particularly if you have younger people. Hey, find Moses, do the exercise, and they'll go. Kids are really good at this. They'll spend the whole Seder going, and find Moses, then find Moses, and they'll look. They'll see the mem, and it's, oh, I found it. And that's Moses. That's mine, right? Because the kids are so weird for reading the Hebrew, but it's a way in which to entertain them. Okay, so let's get down to business for tonight. So I said to you that I'm calling these three sessions minding the P's and the Q's, right? Minding the P's and the Q's of the Pesach experience. When we say minding your P's and Q's, what do we mean normally? The Korim, right? You should act a certain kind of way, be polite, right? Do the things in the right kinds of ways, right? Zaya mensch, they say in Yiddish, right? Be a good human being. Mind the P's and Q's. And for me, I like the concept of playing on the P's and Q's because a lot of the Seder can be boiled down to talking about P's and Q's, right? Last time we talked about all the P's of the Seder, right? All the words, everybody run through them. What were they? Come on. Patience, Pesach, right? Passover. Come on, what else? Practicals, persistence, participation, persnickety. We didn't say that one last time, sorry. Right? All kinds of things that people could add, and you could play with this, and what do they teach us? So we did that kind of the P's and the Q's. Tonight I want to go to the pure kashas, the 4 questions, right? And by the way, when you were a kid, how did it work in your house? Who asked the questions? The youngest, right? And these are words, by the way, that were put into the mouth of children. It gave them a reason to participate. And if we do it right, we put up our children or our grandchildren and we stand them on a chair and they make them front and center and we loud them and everybody shushes everybody else who's trying to sing along because it's the kid's job and everybody gets in the way. And all of that is true and it's part of what happens and it's the reality of all things. So what are some of the challenges? So let's take a look first of all at the text you have in front of you. The 4 most famous questions from the Dropsy Haggadah. Anybody tell me where Dropsy is? Anybody know what Dropsy is? It's not Oopsie. It's Dropsy. Dropsy was the name of a college. Where? United States. In the United States. Good word. In Pennsylvania. Okay. And Dropsy College was like a what? A Cleveland College of Jewish Studies. All right. That's what it was. There were these colleges that were actually places of grand significance in Jewish life. In fact, you could receive a doctorate from Dropsy College. I have a teacher, a very important teacher to me, who was rabbi in New Jersey, but he did his doctoral work at Dropsy College. And it was wonderful, the place where you could do a doctorate. I don't know if the Cleveland College ever gave out doctorates, maybe they didn't do that. But Gratz College in Philadelphia, right? Gratz College is another one of these. the aren't, Spurtus is one of them. These are old colleges. Some have survived, some have not survived. But Dropsy was a place doing very significant research at one time. And the research was in and around this Haggadah. If you want to learn about the Dropsy Haggadah, I dropped some material for you at the end. It's a color page, see it at the end, right? The Dropsy Haggadah, probably the most famous and possibly the most valuable book in the library of the Center for Advanced Judaic Studies. It's a very modest gathering, 10 sheets of brown wrinkled paper known as the Dropsy Haggadah, written in a loopy but very legible semi-Persian Oriental hand. The Dropsy Haggadah is the oldest near complete text of the Passover Haggadah in existence. And you can read it, right? It's quite beautiful, it's quite lovely, you can take a look at it. You can see the manuscript on the second page. You can read about the Dropsy Haggadah. That's not really what I want to do, but I gave you for background information. Because like some of you, I always like the kind of the backstory, right? The rest of the story, as they used to say on the radio. But it comes from the 10th or 11th century in Eretz Israel, right? In the land of Israel, right? And it was looted from the Cairo Geniza. Remember the Cairo Geniza? Okay. We're sitting in a building that houses a school that's important called, what's the school that's here attached to this building or attached to this property? The Solomon Schechter. And Solomon Schechter was the one who did the major work on the Cairo Geniza. That was his major life's work. One of the most beautiful pictures is Solomon Schechter sitting, I think, he's an English gentleman, right? Sitting with a proper waistcoat, etc. Sitting in the middle of what? Piles and piles of the Cairo Geniza materials. Now, what is a Geniza? To hide stuff. So we're thinking Geniza hidden, but it's actually something much more practical than that. It's mud. What is it? It's basically, yeah, instead of burying materials that were no longer usable, you place them there out of respect. But it's sort of what I'll say this, it's a glorified dumpster on some level.
Yeah.
Right? It's a place to put stuff that you're no longer going to use. Okay? And it's like if you were doing, if you were to go back and go through your garbage, you know what you had for dinner, for lunch, what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This was people going back and finding materials that were no longer usable, but what did they learn as they went through? History, prayers, traditions, sometimes variant readings of the very same material that we've already codified. Meaning, the prophet Jeremiah in our standard edition says this, but in the Geniza, I found a variant reading that suggested that what Jeremiah said wasn't this, but was that with a small little shift, just a little twist. And a little twist, when it comes to sacred literature, can be very consequential. Here's the best example I can give you. Okay, Christianity is based on the notion that what? That Mary was a virgin. The Hebrew word for virgin, we know to be, in Hebrew, anybody know enough Hebrew to know that? It's betula, right? You know that from your ketubah, which is betulta, which is Aramaic for betula, which means virgin. Okay, how do you say virgin in Hebrew, betula? How do you say young woman in Hebrew? You could say ne'ara, it's more, but in ancient Hebrew is na'ah, na'ah. When you look at what we call the New Testament, right? When they translate it, they talk about the virginal birth, right? But when they refer back to the Hebrew doesn't say Betula gave birth to a child. It says Na'ah, which means a young woman gave birth to a baby. What's the difference between a young woman giving birth to a baby and a virgin giving birth to a baby? Well, I don't have to go into the detail, but there is a slight difference that is worth noting. But an entire religious civilization forms around the notion of, and please don't share this in the ecumenical community, a mistake in translation, right, between one tradition and another. Because remember, they didn't read Hebrew, they went to Greek, right? And so when they go to Greek, they translate it the way they want it to be. So by the time it gets to the Greek, it gets translated as virgin. But that's not what the Hebrew said. And by the way, when you have this conversation with educated Christians, they acknowledge it. right? They acknowledge it, they understand that that's not what the Hebrew said. It doesn't shake the foundation of their faith, promise you, okay? Just like when we find varying readings, we don't necessarily shake the foundations of our tradition. Because we've lived with it for so long, but it's important for us to appreciate that you need to know, that's why it's so important for people to learn Hebrew. And not just how to read Hebrew, but also to appreciate the Hebrew language. Create a lexicon of words that you know, Baruch, Atah, Aran, those are wonderful, and add to it, Melech, these are all words that you should have, so that you can appreciate the text, and when you read the Tefillah, when you read the prayer, you're praying and participating, you recognize words, and it has greater depth and meaning for it. Okay, let's go down to this Haggadah. So they found it in the Cairo Geniza. I can imagine Solomon Schechter finding this piece and saying, I'm about to read the fear kashas, the 4 questions. Right? And he's looking at it and goes, why is this night different from all other nights? That part sounds good to everybody? Okay, now look at number 2. By the way, what's the first question? Is that what your Haggadah says? You have the 4 questions. What's the first question? You want to look at your Haggadah? Go ahead. Go ahead, look in your Haggadah. But look at page 8 in your Haggadah, okay? What does it say? The first question is, yeah, okay, but look at what they do here. Look at our version. The 4 questions are what? Why?
One question,
Right. One question, 4 answers, or 4 statements, or it isn't the classic way in which we understand it. Because look at page 8, right? The first sort of general header is, how is this night different? And then they divide it into, on all other nights we do this, on all other nights we do that, on all other nights we do this, on all other nights we do that, right? That's the 4 statements associated with really one question, which is, why is this night different? And here are the ways in which it's different. You see what I'm saying? This is an older person coming from the Cairo Geniza, and what's the first question asked? How is this night? Well, why is this night different? So it is a standalone question unto itself. And then on all of the nights, we dip things 1 time, this night 2 times. You've seen that before, right? Matpilin, ein an matpilin afilu pamachat, right? We don't even do it 1 time. Tonight we do it 2 times. Okay? On all the nights we let in matzah, this night only matzah. On all the nights we eat meat, roasted, grilled, and boiled. This night only roasted. Right? By the way, you see that one in your 4 questions in the Haggadah? Right? Now, so answer the question, why? Why don't we see it? Why is it different? Yeah,
Because there's no temple to roast.
okay, so I want to tell you that there's no temple, right? And you're right, there's no temple, and it's a great answer on some level, but ask yourself the question, how often do we talk about the temple, even though it doesn't exist? At the end of the Amidah, many of us say, right, Shivane Bet Hamikdash, right, when the temple is rebuilt, I will continue to bring my offerings. Now, the conservative Siddur has played a little bit with that. We don't talk so much about that era so much, or about the bringing of sacrifices the same kind of way. But you grew up thinking what? Someday, may come soon, the temple will be rebuilt and we'll all go back, right? Here's a great line. I'll teach you something funny. When I was in yeshiva, when you made a mistake, or when the rabbi made a mistake, which wasn't very often, but when we caught the rabbi making a mistake, that She'abana Beis Hamikdash, which means when the temple is rebuilt, I will bring chatat, shmena. I'll bring a fat cat. What does that mean? I'll make up for my sin by giving what? A fat cow. That's how you expiated yourself from sin. Right? Think about Yom Kippur. You put your hands on it, right? You send one to hell, literally, Azazel, and you sacrifice one, and all the people of Israel have received expiation for their sins, right? That's the way it worked. So the emphasis on sacrifice was really important. But by the time we look at our versions of the questions, we are no longer living in that reality. And so it's not extant enough for people to say, who cares about what they used to do? I don't see a difference anymore. What we wanted to point out is that what? It is a night that is different than all other nights. And therefore, in the difference of the night, you should become different through the night. Different through the ritual of the night. Right? It's there to change you. And the questions that you set up the Seder with are the questions that will lead you through the Seder to be signposts for things that should trigger particularly the uneducated and particularly children to think about what's different about tonight. By the way, how often do you dip during your meal? I mean, like, we dip 2 times, right? Like, it's not stuff that we're doing, right? But how often do you eat a meal reclining with pillows? Pesach, I don't know what else you do. Maybe you, I don't know what you do in your house, but we don't do a lot of reclining on a regular basis, right? And so what we're trying to do is create some kind of sense. The whole Seder is about the notion of what? Creating experiences that are unique to this moment in time, so that Pesach will be unique to this moment in time, so that people will feel the difference, so that people will feel different and moved to elevate their game, right? To elevate their lives. That's why it's here. And so by looking at this Cairo Geniza Seder, right, and the 4 questions, you see the questions are very different. Which means what for you, at least for me, I know where it's going, but what does it mean to you? It's what?
Is he gone?
100% it's involved, therefore what? Come on, go with me, guys, you know where I'm going.
You're not the same person as you were.
Therefore what? You're evolving, and therefore what? Maybe it's time for what? For these questions to be the questions that are the questions that start out the experience. Let me be a traditional conservative rabbi. Okay? That these start the experience, but what's the real agenda of Pesach? It's not finding the answers, it's finding your questions, the new questions. What are the questions that have to get asked in this day and age? And by the way, with world events being as they are, right? We have to ask the question when we say, Vehisha amda laboti. This is the promise for every generation. Shelo echad bilvad amada. It's not just that one people was out to get us, right? The whole dor vador omdim aleinu lechaloten. In every generation, they're trying to destroy us. Ve'akadosh baruch hu matzilenu miyadam. And God saves us. So guess what? It's bad now. And anti-Semitism is on the rise. And we're experiencing some things that are very terrible. And I don't want to be Pollyanna about it. Don't worry, God's coming. Okay? It's not so simple. But I think we have to believe that what? That it's not the first time we've been oppressed, and it's not the last time we're going to be oppressed. And we are still here to tell the tale. Right? As my son said last year, he was very brazen about this night. My son said, where are the Romans? Where are the Greeks? You know, here we are. They're in the dustbin of history, and we're on the cutting edge of making history. And I think that there's a triumphalism to that that's very consequential and significant, and it helps us tell our tale. Okay, except when what? How about when we're fighting each other? When we look at what's going on in Israel in the streets, right now, again, are we fighting each other? Are we fighting the government? Are we fighting? I don't know what we're fighting, but there's a lot of stuff going on where 100,000 people are marching through the streets of Tel Aviv on Saturday night after Saturday night after Saturday night. And it's a complicated reality. So in every generation, liberation is going to feel a little freer. Look, we actually start to say here, and sometimes at the house with the following question: what do you need from this experience? Okay, we're really good in our house. You tell me you need, my kids, I need you, Abba. Right? When you need something, people usually respond well. Okay, what do you need? So people talk about what they need. Some people say, I want to hear the melodies of my youth. Right? What do you want to hear? Right? You want to hear that. Those are things that they want to hear that stuff. Okay. Some people have different agenda for them. They want to do what? They want to remember the people that are no longer there. They want to have really good food. They want to have fun. They just want to have fun. They want to spend time with their children and grandchildren. Put those beautiful those children, grandchildren on your lap, right? And hold them for a minute, even if they're 5 minutes at the Seder. You want 5 minutes with them. Why? Because guess what? We're still here. And we're doing it in the ways that, maybe a little different than Bubby and Zadie ways. But we also can say it's somewhat similar in some ways. We're still doing Pesach and matzah and maror and wine and all these other kinds of things. Okay? So I want to show you first and foremost that the Haggadah that we have now, and the Tir Kasha, 4 questions, right? The Arba Kushiyot that we have here are this generation's version. Here's the dangerous part of the codification of everything. It gets codified. And it becomes what? Sacrosanct. That's dangerous. Did you ever notice that the Siddur that you have is not the same Siddur that you had before. And no matter what synagogue you go to, somebody's touching, it's not my Siddur, I don't like this Siddur. Right, it's not the one I grew up with, it's not that red and yellow Haggadah. Right, people get very connected to the prayer book. When was the time that you switched over to Slim Shalom here? And by the way, remember there was,
7 years.
yeah, so this is what they call the Slim Shalom, not the Sim Shalom, right? We got the 2 volumes of the Slim Shalom, and now, right, and then we got the new version, right, Lev Shalem, right? Right, so this is the, the full, I mean, we're changing, and I know the reasons why, it's not because people are making a lot of money from the rabbinical assembly by putting out these, where, trust me, it's not a lot of money in prayer book making. But it's because you're trying to speak to an audience in a certain kind of way, at a certain kind of time. And again, we don't necessarily use this kind of technology, but I would imagine into the next era, we likely will not have these kinds of books. Other people have their own kind of reader, if they use such technology on Shabbat. Right? Or it'll be projected on some kind of screen, or there'll be a chip inside your head, right? That you'll see it in your eye because we'll have that thing. Maybe I'm happy about it, not happy. By the way, I'm up biblical. I have 4,000 volumes that I moved, right, several times. One time to Tokyo, Japan, right? Okay. Literally was a slow boat from China that brought the books back. Okay. But I love books. I like holding them. There's something special, the spell. Right, there's something about it, and I remember when places that I studied with my father, my grandfather, they're places. Sometimes I find a piece of paper, or sometimes I make a note in the book. I love that. Okay, it's not the same when you do it on like this text doesn't come alive when you're looking at it this way. It's just a simple way in which to do it. Other people are looking at it. My kid, he doesn't even look at anything in the book. Nothing in the book, where everything is online for that. And by the way, on the device that's this big, right? I've got a folio atomic to see all the commentaries, and feel the richness of the page. They don't learn that. It's just a different reality. And I'll be a Luddite to the end of time. It's okay. And I'll love it. Okay. Let's look at this question. Okay. Look at the difficult. What's the deal with roasted only meat? And why don't we ask this anymore? Right? You see, it's not in our Haggadah. Okay. And by the way, if you need the citation here, it's in Exodus. You see it? Right, speak to all the congregation of Israel, and what are they supposed to do? Right? They're supposed to roast the lamb. That's the idea. It's roasted lamb. And you can imagine, by the way, because we've probably seen scenes of this sort, the Samaritans, for example, continue to do this lamb roasting thing. You can see them in Israel, they still do this lamb. And it's kind of a very interesting idea. Okay, this is what the tradition was. And here we have in Deuteronomy, right? Don't sacrifice the Passover offering in the gates, but at the place which Adonai your God chose. So what's the shift between the first one and the second one? Right? Look at Exodus. Speak all the congregation of Israel. So in the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb, every person shall take a lamb, according to the father's houses, lamb for the household. They shall eat the flesh at night, right? Fire and matzah with bitter herbs, etc., etc., etc. By the time we get to the commentary in the book of Deuteronomy, what does it say? Where should you do the sacrificing? Yeah, wait a second. It's no longer a home ritual. It's now what? For lack of a better term, it's a shul ritual. You're supposed to do it at the Makom Asher Yikal Bo Adonai, the place that God chose. And where did God choose? At least according to our tradition, Yerushalayim, right? Jerusalem. You're supposed to go to the temple of Jerusalem. So hold on, what's happening here? How can in one place say you're supposed to do it at home? And then another place it's supposed to say it in Jerusalem, right? So what are we seeing here, even within the Bible itself? Evolution of how rituals are conducted. And depending on what's called the sitzen leben, right? Which means the place in which you sit, right? You will change the ritual. So when we were in the midst of COVID and people had to do a Pesach Seder on Zoom, right? There are people who held up and said, no, this is not the way we should do it. And on the other hand, the conditions were such that if we didn't do that, you might not have had a Pesach Seder. You might have been so isolated, you might not have been able to see at least the picture of your children and your grandchildren. So we made a decision, a practical decision to move in that direction. But how different is our shift from live to Zoom by comparison to the shift from, what does it say here? House to temple. You think it was easy? What do you think? We're the only stiff-necked generation of Jews? Right? You think we're the only stiff? They were stiff-necked too. And if it wasn't Bithar Hesia, right, publicly in a pasuk in the Torah, a verse in the Torah, do you think anybody would have moved to going to Jerusalem? By the way, it's like saying to you, okay, you can no longer do Shabbos at home, you have to come to the synagogue every Shabbos. No Shabbos at home, no ritual Shabbos at home, the only place you can do it is at shul. You would say to me, hey, Sugar, I love Friday night dinner. I love shul, but I love Friday night dinner, right? And Hanukkah, I have to come to the synagogue. I want to Hanukkah in my beautiful bay window for my family and my friends to see, right? And there is a struggle between public and private religion. Judaism has figured out a nice balance to do that, but this is not a balance. This is saying, get yourself from Tzfat, right, to Jerusalem. Now, hold on 1 second. When I say go from Tzfat to Jerusalem, we get in our car and you drive, okay? Not such a big deal. Israeli traffic, it isn't, okay? But it's not the same as what? Walking, right? And packing, and animals, and children, and food, and rest stops. And by the way, the cost of going, you have to stop at inns, right? And then you get to Jerusalem and you have to what? You have to buy a sacrifice if you haven't brought it with you, and it can be non-blemished. And remember the story of, right, Jesus and the money changers and turning over the tables? What were they doing there? You had to buy a special coin in order to buy the lamb. You couldn't buy it with the current, there was no money trader there, or there was a money trader there, to bring it into the currency of the place in which you find yourself. It was a whole business unto itself. And P.S., you know what happens when business happens? There's always somebody who does what? Keeps the finger on the scale a little too much. It's not 1 pound, it's 1.5 pounds. Right? Because business corrupts people. Because when it becomes about commerce, people have a tendency to mix things up, right? By the way, the old saying, there's no business like shul business. On some level, shul is a business, right? You gotta keep these buildings going, gotta keep light, power, gotta educate. They're all for good purposes. Not always just everything for the best purpose, even within religion. And I don't only pick on Judaism, it's true in many religious traditions. You ever watch religious traditions that they don't like exactly the way that the religion was suggesting that it should be practiced, so they decide they're going to start a new version of that, right? And it happens over the course of time. Religion isn't a pure thing. You get to see the evolution happening right in front of us within our own 5 books of. Okay, here's my monograph. Since you want to talk about philosophers, take a look at my monograph. See this? Somebody want to read this for me? The laws of leavened and unleavened bread. Okay, this is what they call, mitzvot, shel, what? Oh, hilchot, chametz u'matz. Okay, anybody want to read? Circa, this is my monograph. Yeah, please.
Circa 1170 CE.
This is the second commentary in this section. Yeah.
It's the second cup, and here the sun is. Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we eat meat roasted, boiled, or cooked. Tonight, only roasted. In today's times, we don't say tonight only roasted because we don't have a paschal sacrifice.
Okay, so let's stop for a second. What do you notice first of all in this section? What do you do with the second cup? You mix your second. What does it mean mix the second cup? That, okay, so wine was what? Was dispensed in a certain kind of way, and what did you add to wine? Water. Why did you add water to wine? Or because you had to make it so it was drinkable. Right? It was more like syrup. And if anybody was ever in Israel, there's something called petel. Petel is this terrible stuff that's sugary and sweet and colors that don't exist in nature, right? And what do? You add a little seltzer water, or the spritz bottle, right? And you get a little bit of the sweet, and you get a little bit of the water itself. Yeah, but taking Manischewitz and watering it down. I mean, Manischewitz is exactly what it is, but Manischewitz is the watered down version of what wine would taste. So you mixed it. So the first thing you need to do is take it out and mix it so that it's ready for consumption. It's not even a step that we even think about right now, right? We just pour our wine. But back then there was another step that happened. But what are they commenting on here? Which is what? Why is this night different? On other nights we eat meat, roasted, boiled, and cooked, tonight only roasted. In today's time, we don't say tonight only roasted because we don't have paschal sacrifice. So what does it tell you that happened over the course of time? They stopped eating a paschal sacrifice, which means they didn't eat They didn't eat roasted, probably they didn't eat lamb at all. Whether they ate it during the course of the year or not is not the point. The point is that the Seder itself, they didn't eat roasted. And they didn't eat roasted because, like I said earlier, sometimes the absence creates consciousness, just like with Moses. Absence creates consciousness, right? If you do something every year and you don't do it that year, you know that one of your children and grandchildren is going to say, Daddy, did you forget? Or Baba, did you forget? And you most of the time you smile and you say, and you pretend like you didn't forget, or you do whatever it is that you do. It's like, oh, you know this. Why do you think that is? Right? Why do we sing this different? Or why didn't we do it at all? So let me pause for a moment. We're living in a very difficult time for the world in general, okay? But for the Jewish people, is there something that we shouldn't be doing this year? Is there something we shouldn't be doing this year to accentuate the fact that we're living in the kind of difficult times that we live in? I don't know. It's easier to talk about it. So we just saw it before. Right? Do you really think that in this day and age, when we're in such a difficult place, we should have stood up, and I did, so don't get me wrong, okay? But we stood up and every time we heard Haman, we said, ooh, okay? So somebody takes a video of Jews doing this. By the way, you know the traditions around Amalek and about Haman coming from Amalek? There are people literally like bright Haman at the bottom of their shoe and they go like this with their feet for white out, right? Not what to say boo, okay? There are people who scream things like, hang the son of a bitch, right? I heard it in shul. Won't say this shul wasn't this shul. This is a place of people with good class. But in other places, people say all kinds of things. And the question is, what do we hear in violent language and in violent behavior? And what do our children and grandchildren hear when we do this? Like, don't kids ever ask you the question, or my kids used to ask me, do we really want this? Is this what we really want? Do we really want to destroy the number of people that the Purim tale really wants us to talk about? And how we get to Pesach. And what happens at Pesach? It wasn't just 10 plagues, it was 250 plagues, right? And it wasn't just the Egyptians, it was all these people who died, right? The only guy who survived was that SOB Pharaoh, so he could watch all the destruction. By the way, remember Cecil B. DeMille in the movie? Remember? When Pharaoh's watching in that great moment in time, he puts his hand, his crown is fallen, his hand goes on his forehead, and you see, oh, he realized he had made such mistakes. And for a moment, that anguish made you either feel really proud or really a little Rahman, instead of a little pity for the guy. He just lost everything. He used to be a king. Now instead of a melech, he's a lemech. You know what that means? You see it right? Melech and lemech have the same letters, but one means a fool and one means a okay, so like it's everything topsy-turvy. But we're living in a world at a time, do we really want to declare? Oh, here's the best, go to the end of the Haggadah. Okay, let's look at something. This is really, I think drives home the point. The very end of the Haggadah, if it's here, we have it here. Oh, I don't even know if they have it in the Haggadah. Do they have the part with Shvok Hamatcha? Pour out your wrath upon. Do you remember that part? You read it at your. Yeah. So let's see if it even have it. I don't even see it. But it's a part that says what? Pour out your wrath, O God, on those who don't know you, right? And God, we're praying for God to destroy people who don't know you. And what? By the way, the tradition is you open the door for who? Elijah the prophet. But there are people also open at the beginning of the Seder, right? Or at the beginning of the Seder, when you invite people in, let all who are hungry come and eat. There's another tradition that when you sing Chasal Sidur Pesach, right? When you're doing the very end of it, and you're reading the Shvok HaMatcha, pour out your wrath, what do? You stand at the door. So I was once in Philadelphia at somebody's Seder, and right next door to them was a nunnery. Okay? It was like 2:00 in the morning. The poor little nuns are sleeping. This guy goes up. And big Shvok HaMatcha, pour out your wrath on all those who don't know that God is God and will live a religion that's different than our religion. And then he adds Schwester, which means sister. Catholic sister, you hear me? Right? And I was like so embarrassed. I was really embarrassed.
It is your.
Oh. Page 44, very good. Well, what page 44 is backwards? 44.
Very lower.
Yeah, lower half, right? Shloch Hamat Kala, Goyim Porch around upon the heathen nations. Could you even say this today? I mean, not in mixed company. Right? Would you say this today? And maybe you could metaphorize it and say, oh, the nice Christians that we invited for the Seder, who are now our in-laws, by the way, and 90% of sorry, I don't mean to pour salt on wounds, but it's the reality of most of our families have been people who in a different generation have called heathens, goyim, right? Not nations, but really heathens, right? And that do not acknowledge thee upon the kingdoms, that do not call upon thy name, for they have devoured Jacob and laid waste his dwelling places. Like, is that what you want to talk about at the Seder? Especially in a time of this sort, because we're trying to talk about us being a different kind of people, right? We want to rage against such people, right? We don't want to become these kinds of people. And vengeance is a very powerful kind of emotion. And I get it, why it gave us power, right? A powerless people talking about what they hope they would do to the people who are not nice to them. I get it, okay? But is that us? Is that us today? Trust me, it's not us. You can call Uber at any moment to come pick you up, right? You can have any food you delivered here as quickly as 50 to 40 minutes. You'll have anything you want. That's not the reality. And so the question becomes, when our young people read this section, what are they saying? So just a recommendation. Either choose that you're going to read it and struggle with it. Say, what does this mean to you? How does this make you feel? Or suggest that this is a section here, we can look at it. Maybe we don't want to look at it. Maybe this is the year not to. Or maybe it's exactly the year to look at it and struggle. You have to know who you're Seder, right? You have to be really careful about what you do at a Seder. I think I told you it's for the last of the Seder that went until 2 o'clock in the morning, right? That, the people were not expecting. They never invited us back again, right? They wanted me to run a Seder for them, which I did. We prepared for it, and we were all the material. And by 11 o'clock, we hadn't gotten to the second cup of wine. They were a little hungry. Right? But that's the way we Seder. And I wasn't savvy enough or smart enough or sophisticated or even mature enough to understand that I was Sedering with people who couldn't live by my kind of Seder. They wanted something different. And by the way, just to be honest, how about the lady slave, and there was a woman, slave all day to prepare a meal. And she expected to eat okay, maybe we'll start at 7 by 8 with eating. But at 11, what did her roast look like, right? What did it what did the chicken taste like? What did the cinnamon taste like? People have a lot of pride in those things. Well, I think we shouldn't downplay the importance of the foods that we imbibe. Let alone that your wine that you chilled is now hot. Right? I mean, if you wait that long, you have to know who you got at the table and what you can do to be engaged. Okay, want to go on a little bit more? We're okay with this so far? Okay, another difficulty that I want to raise is where is the question about reclining, right? You're supposed to recline. Just by show of hands, do people put pillows out? Okay, so we still do that? Does anybody actually not put out pillows? Okay, not. Do you recline when you're drinking the wine? When it says in Haggadah, lean to the left? Right, you know why we lean to the left? It's a tradition of what? It's supposed to, it's a bubamaisa, right? But this was a Greek concept of leaning was what they did, right? They had the kind of beds that they laid down on, right? But also what? You leaning to the left was supposed to aid in digestion. Why don't you lean during the maror? You don't want to get that much digestion, right? You don't want it to get stuck. So there's a sometimes, and it says in Haggadah, do not lean. Right? Because they're worried that it'll go down the wrong place. By the way, have you not had people at your Seder over the year who decide they're going to be real knackers? They're going to prove how strong they are by eating the white marrow. Big chunk of it, and then they spend the next 10 minutes gagging and schnott's coming out of their nose and their eyes are watering. There's always somebody at the Seder who decides that they're going to be a tough guy. Okay? Okay, a little marrow is good. I'm not so sure a lot of marrow is then. How much bitterness do you need beyond the bitterness that you have already? Okay. So the question here is what? On the eve of Passover, where is the question about reclining? On the eve of Passover, from close to the time, to close to the time of the afternoon offering, no one must eat until nightfall. So what are you supposed to do coming to the Seder? Come hungry, right? Even the poorest person in Israel must not eat on Passover. Wouldn't it be exactly the opposite? You would say poor people shouldn't, don't have to, not eat, because if they had food, you would want them to eat, they're poor, they're starving. No, you must come, right? Night, until nightfall. Must not eat until Passover Eve unless he reclines, right? You must recline. They must give him no fewer than 4 cups of wine, even if he receives relief from the charity plate. What does that mean? Even if you had to what? Get the money from the food, from the food bank, you should make sure they have 4 cups of wine. Very important tradition, right? That's why we create most ultimately, we collect the money, it's coins for wheat. But what it really gets used for is to give to people to do what? To get the food that they need. That's why your rabbi, I would imagine, you sell the chametz, you get rid of it. That money goes into a kitty, right? Into a karen, into a fund to help people who need this food. And trust me, having been a congregational rabbi, you do not want to know the number of people who come out of the woodwork. And I would imagine that Cleveland is the same as it was in St. Louis, that there are lots of people who get very excited about the possibility of celebrating Passover, but with the cost, we bought 4 boxes of chocolate. I thought it was more expensive than my mortgage. You see the kosher Passover chocolate? It's ridiculous what they're charging for food for Passover. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Yeah, how are people doing it? People who are not living comfortably and yet want to make Pesach. So we have to make sure we have them out there. So propose solutions to these difficulties. Number 1, there were several acceptable variations on the questions to be asked, right? Perhaps there was no fixed formula of questions. Why am I saying that? So 2 things. There were different acceptable versions of the questions because why? Times changed, and each Haggadah was a Haggadah for its era, right? One of the coolest Haggadot I saw in my parents' house that I got myself a copy was the Haggadah for the liberated land. What a great title for Haggadah. What do you imagine Haggadah was? That's right. That's not a picture of the lamb, right? Sitting at the Seder table with a copy of the Haggadah, right? Like hopefully he wasn't sacrificing humans. Okay, but the idea was to be a vegetarian. And we were liberated from what? From the notion that we have to do Pesach in this fashion. Okay, and I appreciate the kind of humor and all, and I appreciate the thinking that what do we want to liberate? So there's acceptable variations within the tradition itself, and there's also what? The need for having it not be so formulaic. So wait, let's just stop for a second. Are you comfortable with the notion of not having a formula? What if you didn't get your red and yellow Haggadah? You'd be lost, right? So there's something about the formulaics, but can you also wrap your head around the notion of that the formulaic, we can use it, but maybe we can enhance it in some kind of way with the conversation. Just open it up for a moment just to see the food stains, right? Which, by the way, is my favorite part of every Haggadah. The food stains and wine.
It's like
But here's the point. The point is that every one of those pieces of matzah or crumbs or stains is history. And you know what? If you go back far enough, it's not just food, it's tears. How many Bubbles and Staters cried watching their grandchildren sing with their lashes? How about in a generation where people sat around, scraped together for themselves in a ghetto somewhere, right? Enough to have a piece of matzah, right? Or in some of the Haggadot, there are these prayers of great teachers who lived through the Shoah or difficult moments of time that starts with, God, I'm so very sorry that I cannot observe Passover. So please accept whatever it is, this little token of my practice to be instead of the Manischewitz matzah, right? That I'm have a beautiful round in my soul, right? Because it's so much about the service of the heart, avodah shebaleh, right? The service of the heart. And in some ways, it's so much more grand than the grandest of grand seders that we put on, because it's meaningful. In some ways, as much as that's a simple, it's a beautiful Haggadah, but it's much more beautiful than any $2,000 Haggadah to you, because it's memory. You can't trade off against it, and you can't it's very hard to recreate. If you have to recreate that Haggadah, you couldn't. Because that little schmutz right there that little schmutz was Zeta schmutz. Right? And I remember when Zeta dropped that piece of charosis or a little bit of charosis on that, and that's when it happened. And I remember how Zeta's face looked when he dropped the charosis. Right? And I remember when that guy came to my house, Yaakov, who ate too much of the maror and it started coming out his nose, right? Like, and I remember my uncle Bernie, right, who misbehaved at everything and still does. It just, those are things that create memory from generation to generation, right? That's what ties us together. Okay. So let me just go to what I said, proposed solutions to the difficulties, right? This is Lawrence Hoffman, who's a wonderful teacher at the Hebrew Union College. But he says what? There were a number of acceptable variations on questions. Seder is the Jewish version of festival banquets common throughout the Greco-Roman world called symposia. Symposium. By the way, all of the Seder is supposed to be a Greek symposium, right? Well, why? How do you know that? What do you know about the Greeks? They were into what? The dialectic. It was into what? It was the give and take, it was the question and the answering. That's the style that they wanted to create of the Seder, right? And so everybody added over the course of time. So the Babylonians added that one, since reclining was unusual where they lived. Similarly, dipping lettuce as hors d'oeuvres was usual at Roman banquets. So Palestinians asked why on other nights, I don't mean the Palestinians of today, people come from Palestine asked why on other nights people did once, but on this night twice. In Babylonia, there were no dipping, right? So what do you have? You have sort of a hodgepodge. And the key part of what I think Hoffman is saying here for all of us is that what? We create our own kinds of sense of what the Haggadah and the Seder should be all about with answers or questions or behaviors that are appropriate for what? This given moment in time and are essentially consequential to the people living at this moment in time. Okay? And then the second answer, proposed solution B, perhaps there was no fixed formula ever at all. Okay, now does that seem hard to you? Why do we uproot the table? This is from the Gemara in Babylonian Talmud, right? Babylonian Pesach, right? And why do we uproot the table? Rabbi Yanai said, so that the children should see and ask. In other words, what's the whole purpose of the Seder? Do things that kids will say, Dad, why are you doing that? Okay, right? Abai was sitting before Rabbi. He saw that they removed the tray too quickly. He said, have you already eaten what you are removing and you're removing the tray? Rabbi said, you have exempted us from asking manishkana. In other words, if you've already done something and a kid asks the question, why is this night different than all nights? What have you done? You fulfilled the same. Without what? I haven't said a single word. The whole thing is to what? To get to the notion of what is different about tonight. Okay, I want to stop here for a moment. Do you buy all this? How does it make you feel? Excited, concerned, depressed, eager? Can we just put the faces on without the text for a moment? Would that be possible? Just put the faces of the people for a moment, so I can see if there's any shade of wood out there.
Oh.
Look at the time this way. Okay. Can we show the gallery view? Very good. Okay, I can't see the people, but there are obviously some people. Hi, everybody. Okay. Hi, how are you?
Okay.
Good. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. So, some of you, I see a lot of names, but I don't see necessarily all the people. But here's the key. How does this sort of make you feel? And where are you left with on this? What I'm trying to lay out for you is that the 4 questions themselves have changed over the course of time, right? And the whole purpose of the 4 questions is not only to ask what's happening in the Seder, it's to germinate and generate what discussion and questioning. It's really good. And by the way, discussion usually follows questioning, but part of the problem is that sometimes we get to lecturing before we get to questioning. Right? I'm going to tell you what it is that you need to know, as opposed to why don't you ask me what it is? The greatest teachers in my lifetime taught me many things. But mostly they taught me that you're supposed to ask what it is that you want to know. It would start with, Carnie, why are you here today? What brings you here today? And that's why it said one of the great questions to start to say with is, why are you here today? What do you want to get from here? You know, if you don't set the expectations, you don't ask the question, people they can't tell you what they want. So let's do the exercise. Why are you going to the Savior this year? What do you want from the Savior?
Want to achieve a delicate balance
Of
of having the room be satisfied. The experience.
and of course, satisfaction means time.
Yeah.
But you want to aspire. Okay, somebody else, why are you coming? What do you want from the Savior?
Say, bridge.
Want to excite your grandchildren, right? Great. What would you like to do?
I like to give it for money.
I'd like to be a parent. Isn't that interesting? It's almost absolutely nothing to do with the seder itself. The seder becomes the catalyst for being with family. By the way, I love that answer because I think it's the most true answer. I love the songs of the seder, right? I love it all. I love the foods of the seder, but you know what? What I love most is being together. Unfortunately, my parents were supposed to come. My dad got a little touch of pneumonia, so he's not gonna come. I gotta tell you, not only for me is that sad. Listen, my dad's 84 or 85, God said we should be around for a lot more years. But my children, I said, Zaba's not coming? Right? What does that mean? Who's gonna sing the song at the end of the Seder? My dad always has a tradition of washing the dishes at the end of the Seder. That's his afterwards. And he sings this, my father cannot sing a lick. Okay? He sings a song called the Macaroon song. Macaroon, 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 macaroon. He does it for 20 minutes, just watching the dishes. And my kids now sing macaroon, macaroon. Then who's gonna sing the macaroons? Right? So I said, do yourself a favor, call Saba before, and have him sing the macaroon song. It'll resonate with you for the rest of the Seder. Hopefully next year we'll have a chance to do it. But those are powerful moments. Okay, what else? Like, what are you hoping? What's gonna be? What do you hope it does for you?
Being with family and reliving the senior service.
Isn't that interesting? We're living the savings that are like them. This must have been helpful. You really enjoyed them. Well, any of the savings that you went to a hard thing? Were any of the starry Passover savings that you went to a hard thing? Hard on you. Yeah, you wanna say?
We went to one that was my husband's family his parents had a group of 3 other couples, they called it the Groups. And when I went to that one, it was so chaotic, it was like, it didn't have a spiritual development. Too bad, this was all wonderful memory that.
And you
that's
said,
what it is.
you said this was a once in a lifetime experience. Okay. Right, but again, one of the things I said in the first session is we part on Pesach, right? The peace of Pesach is part for people who are downward story. I know that's hard because it sometimes separates families. Maybe you can't do it for both times, but maybe one night you'll take one for the team, right? On the next time, be at a state that's meaningful.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
I found it hard to make the transition from the Seders that I grew up with, which was my favorite, right? To then adjusting to the Seders in my new married life, right? And having to adapt and alternate and have different families. And then when we moved away from our hometown to adjust it to now all of a sudden it's friends and
Yeah.
maybe less family. And to make those adjustments, that's always, still living in the past a lot,
Right.
but I'm trying to transition in.
So, it's, the old joke about the parents who whisper in the ears of their children certain messages at night, right? Like, state school, right? Not private school, right? Or like, marry somebody, what are the things they whisper in the ears, right? One of the things that in my family, my mom said she whispered is, marry somebody who's an orphan.
Say that, oh my God.
Marry somebody who's an orphan. Why? Because then you can keep my traditions alive, right? I'm not worried about their tradition. Right now, we say it tongue in cheek, okay, but on some level, the complication of merging families is not simple, it's not simple. So let's go back to what it is, but I appreciate that, Brent. What you would like them to say, what do you want them to
Well, I was gonna say, we don't have any family in town, and this kids which are go out of town and everything. So it's with friends, and actually we're starting our Seder with, what do you want to get out of it? And what does this mean to you? And so for me, it's discussion and.
Because the stimulation of discussion is really good, right? And it's an orchestrated conversation, and also, you probably know that it has an end. Some discussions don't have an end, and you'll probably say, okay, then now we can continue the conversation over the meal. But at least we initiated something deep and thoughtful. You guys want to share something?
Well, our Seder is gonna be much larger than we have it normally is. We're going to Colorado to be extended family, we were not normally with it. And so I think this is a really peculiar, challenging moments in time, and so it's that combination of family, but also to generate conversation about all the concepts of the Seder that really looking forward to.
And it'll be interesting, will you catch some people with eye rolls as it's going? Will you catch some people over? Yeah, so you'll catch some eye rolls. Other people are gonna say things like, oh, shoot, wasn't meaningful enough to our history. Probably, okay? By the way, sometimes we say with the rapid, if you bat 4 out of 10, you're in the Hall of Fame in baseball. It's like with the Rabbi has 4 to 10 good sermons, they ain't getting a renewal time. So okay, pick 70% or 80%, right? Like the bar is high, but the truth is, what's our expectation? What's our expectation? Did you want to add something as well? Something you're looking forward to? Hoping for? It's okay. You've been so quiet, you've been working so hard. You get paid for tonight. You're always the sharpest, right? Is there something you're looking forward to in the center?
No, what more to say, just family.
It's great, it's great. So, I want to say that, we're gonna stop here in just a moment, but, and there's a lot more text here that you can go through, and I always kind of do that, and so you can take a look at it, you can read the pieces that are here. I wanna sort of finish where I was, where I am, and by the way, there's a beautiful section, what's the role of children here, take a look at, okay? But these folks saying the essence of Passover and some of this wonderful stuff, we don't necessarily have time to do. This end of our stuff, there's no end to this conversation on chestnut. But the part here for me that I wanted to emphasize here is this is some more of the cues, right? Some of the cues, the questions that you want to ask. And I want to make sure that we really think about the possibility of asking the questions in a thoughtful way. And what do they say? Preparation is key, right? Those who fail to plan to fail. Come with some really key questions that you want, or you want people to answer. If you're really good and you know who's coming to your Seder, could you email them in advance and say, we're going to talk about this, right? Would you do me a favor? Spend a few moments collecting your thoughts in and around this. And if you're really, really good, ask somebody to write it down and say, I would like to collect these and maybe make our own version of a new Haggadah, which includes my reflections from this year, right? Of 2024. We gathered in Colorado and, we hear some of the questions that we put out on the table and some of the ideas that we grappled with. And in, 2044, you're going to look back at it and you're going to say, oh, Brent's so small, again, you're going to say, hey, this is what we were talking about back there, and see what we were talking about versus what we weren't talking about. Just as we saw here, what were they talking about when they had this particular Haggadah, right? This Haggadah, the dropsy Haggadah. What were the issues that were at hand? Right? What were they talking about in the first Passover? By the way, so I wish I had a board in, but you can see I'm drawing some circles, okay? Passover as the number 4 is very important in Passover, right? 4 cups, 4 children, right? All the things that are 4. Right? There are 4 levels of Pesach that happen simultaneously. This is the big teaching for today, okay? You have what's called Pesach de Mitzrayim, right? That's Aramaic for the Pesach of Mitzrayim, right? Pesach shel Mitzrayim. There's an event that transpired long ago, Pharaoh and the Israelites and Moses and Aaron and Miriam and that experience, okay? That's called Pesach Demitzrayim. And what's interesting about these Pesachim that I'm going to talk about, 4 Pesachs, is they all exist simultaneously. In other words, when we're doing this Pesach, we're doing what? What happened back then? Okay, you got it? That's Pesach Demitzrayim. The next level is what? Pesach Shelma. What comes next? What would you think? How about Pesach Shel Eretz Yisrael? Right, the next one is that we were free people living in our own land. What that really means and how long it lasted isn't really important, but it was the Pesach that we did where? In Mikdash, in the Mikdash, right? In the tabernacle, in the Beit HaMikdash. That was the Passover, which had all of the what? All of the korbanot, all of the sacrifice, right? That's why we sing about it on Shabbos. Right? And on Shabbos, you're gonna bring a bunch of fat cats and cows, and you're gonna sacrifice them to the Lord. And we sing these wonderful songs, by the way. Good thing we don't know the translation, right? We all Shabbat, right? And so they have Pesach of what? The Pesach of the Mikdash, which moves it away from the Pesach of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, to a Pesach of what? Of us in our own land. Then what happens? How long does that last, by the way? Relative to Jewish history, the shortest period of time is the time that we actually live in. It may be the most intense, the most consequential, the most aspirational, the one we hope to get back to, okay? But it's a short period of time. Then what comes next? Okay, so let's call that not just the diaspora, because people lived in Israel and celebrated, but it felt diaspora because we weren't in charge of ours. Even if you were there, living in the land, it didn't always feel like it was ours. So let's call that Pesach de Dorot, the Passover of generations, right? So you have Pesach de Mitzrayim, Pesach de Mikdash, Pesach de Dorot of the generation, the generational Passover that happened. And guess what? That Passover was done in different kind of ways, right? By the way, has anybody ever had Yemenite matzah on Pesach? Go find some Yemenite matzah on Pesach. You know why? You'll never go back. Because it's tasty and it's soft. It's soft, yeah. Can you imagine matzah that's not crunchy? Okay, it's a whole different experience, right? You can find it. It's so fascinating to me that they have this, and most Ashkenazi Jews have no idea. Okay, but the Pesach of the world gives us a chance to talk about what? The various ways in which people interpreted the notion of Pesach, and what does it mean to be liberated in a time when what? You're not ever really going to be liberated because you're living outside of your own control. You're not living in your own land, right? Right? To be a free people in our own land is an aspiration for the Jewish people, but we didn't live it very often. So Pesach, the what? Pesach de Mitzrayim. Pesach de Mikdash. Pesach de Dorot. And then there's one more Pesach. Yeah, so what would you call that one if you wanted to give it? Pesach de Shema? Yeah, Pesach de Mashiach. The Pesach of the Mashiach, the Messianic redemption. Which does what? It brings us back, ideally, in the ways in which the rabbis would want, to a Pesach that looks like Pesach de... I don't know.
Beit HaMikdash.
The
faith.
Mikdash. What's interesting is we never want to go back to Egypt. Not that far back. We want to go back to what? To the ultimate time in the rabbinic imagination, which is what? We have our own temple, our own sanctuary, where we do our own rituals in the way in which we want to do it, which means, now you want to know why I wanted to be a rabbi when I grew up? The way the rabbis wanted us to do it. Judaism. Now I'm going to be a real heretic. Judaism is not a biblical religion. Judaism is a rabbinic religion. The rabbis do what goes on. And as much as people want to argue about it, even to today, now we live in America, we're all free, right? Synagogues are not supposed to be democracies. They're not. Because, right, you don't hire a shoemaker, you know, to I don't know, take out your tonsils. And I hate to use that terminology, it's only because one of my teachers used to say that, right? Rabbis know religion. That's what we're trained in religion. Rabbis are supposed to lead, it doesn't mean rabbis are always right. And it doesn't mean the rabbis are always correct about everything. Sometimes rabbis are out of touch and then you can be reminded. But the notion in the rabbinic world is the rabbis have no power. Right? By the way, you know what? Here's a great example. Who told the high priest how to do the work of the high priest on Yom Kippur? Who told him? Moses. Wouldn't you have said Aaron if you're gonna say that? I guess Moses told Aaron and Aaron then told, okay. So what did they do? If you look into Gemara, it's very interesting. 30 days before Yom Kippur, they take the high priest from his home. They take him from his home. What does it mean to take him from his home? Got a very nice seated posturepedic mattress. I don't want to leave my, what about my wife? What about my kids? What about my kitchen? Right? I like my morning shake. I like my morning coffee. They take him and they take him to a place and they seclude him. And what do they do during that 30 days? They bring animals before him and say, this is a chicken, and this is a cow, and this is a doggy, and this is kosher, and this is not kosher, like he's a 3-year-old. And then what do? They go over all the laws with him. The rabbis go over all the laws of the sacrifices of Yom Kippur. So that when the time comes and he goes into the Holy of Holies, what? Whoops, I didn't do it the right way. And guess what happens if you didn't do it the right way? First of all, did you know that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, when he went into the Holy of Holies, had a rope around his waist? Why? Yeah. In case he did the ritual wrong, this is Zetz gets down, right? And you can't go in, it's the Holy of Holies. So what do you gotta do? You yank them out. So what does it say about the real power? Who has power? Not the priest. Who has real power in Jewish life? It's the rabbinic tradition that has power. You know who writes all the rules? Rabbis. The rabbis make them. They base them on the Torah, and they base them on the teachings of our tradition. But the real power lies in the people who what? Who operationalize and translate and make it relevant to any generation. Now, let me just go to my next iteration of this. That means that you are your own rabbis at your own Seder tables. What you need to do is figure out the right balance, the right thing you said, really the right thing. How do I engage somebody around this table, everybody around it, but at least with something? And maybe for somebody it's the right wine, and for somebody it's the right, I don't know, matzah, and for somebody it's the right question, for somebody it's the right attention, for somebody it's the shortness of the experience, the opportunity to go watch a hockey game or something in the middle, whatever people do. It's terrible that it's during playoff seasons, right? Basketball, whatever's going on. It's hard, okay? It's really, really hard. You have to be able to find a way to create an experience. And it's no different than before. The only difference is the power has shifted much more to individuals. Right? When we say things like by the power invested in, what does that mean? When clergy say that, who invested? When you have somebody married, by the way, it's the worst thing in the world to say. I never married. I married, people marry each other. I catalyze and facilitate this. I say to the couples all the time. I was in Detroit, they did an Oprah, a big show. My God, it felt like a football stadium, so long, right? It makes like some of the shows feel small because just the length of it, right? It was long, 2,000 seats long. And it was pretty amazing when I was there. But I said to the couple from the Bima, which by the way, they showed me the video, I looked it up this small, from the camera from way back. But I said to them, listen, I'm not marrying you, you're marrying each other. My job is to help create meaning in this experience so that you can feel connected to one another. But understand, that's the power that's invested in you. Sacralize the experience, make it a sacred experience. But when it comes to this, you are catalyzing the experience. And you have to know at what level can you catalyze it for? What do people need? And so therefore, I finished where I started about this. These sessions are about preparation. Prepare. And those who fail to prepare will be prepared to fail. Think about what it is you want to accomplish. Some people come with notes, and some people come with haggadahs, and some people have dog ear pages, right? And some people have thought about the ways in which they're gonna try to engage people with all kinds of places. You know, the little play bags and things, that's what, all of that is so cute. We put out frogs because they're jumping everywhere, people play with them. And also, you know, I think you have it here too, I think, you have like a parade ground, instead of a playground, an area where kids can just get a toy and play. I call it a parade ground. You should have it, so kids have some toys, instead of chasing kids out of the sanctuary. Keep them in the sanctuary, by the way, if you really wanna do it, right? There's a level of decorum that you want, put it at the front, let them be the locals. Right, because kids often understand that they're being watched, right? Well, if not, put it at the back, let them play. Let them play, but let them hear, right? Shine, Israel, you will not believe how much children learn just by hearing, right, and being in the experience. So I wanna say, you gotta figure out how to make it right for the people who are there and with you. And the greatest compliment will be when somebody says, you know, it's been a Seder like I never had before. When my grandma used to say that, she didn't mean it so much as a compliment, right? I never saw a thing like this before in my life. Right? If your grandfather was here, what he would say. But I hope that would be the case. And let me just finish with the greatest Talmudic teaching of all time. Right, the whole notion that, you know, we have great scholars who show up in the bed midrash, right? Come to that study so former people, like Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the house of study of Rabbi Akiva, right? He comes in, right? And he's teaching away Rabbi Akiva, teaching all kinds of ideas. And they look at Moshe and say, what do you think about this? I never heard this, right? I never heard this. In fact, I don't even understand what word he's saying, except the last thing he said. Somebody asked him a question, where did you learn it? And it says, Halacha leMoshe b'Sinai. This is a law that was taught by Moses at Mount Sinai. Moses says, thank God, I still remember what I did. So on some level, that's sort of where we're at in the Haggadah. Please be careful, right? You know, one of the great sad parts for me is that the Maxwell House Haggadah is the number one Haggadah of all time. It's not because it's not a nice Haggadah. It's just, it's associated with what? Maxwell House, which is what? Freeze-dried. It's freeze-dried. Isn't that the whole concept of freeze-dried copy? If you have a freeze-dried Seder, I worry about you. And I worry about your children, I worry about your grandchildren, and I worry about the future of the Jewish people. Make it juicy, folks. Make it fun, make it interesting, make it deep. Sing, drink, eat, laugh, cry. The most powerful Seder I ever had. Really have to finish so I can fix. I could have danced something. Was my parents asked us 2 weeks in advance, we'll take over the Seder and all the parents will be the children and the children will be the parents, right? We're gonna lead you. And at a certain point, we turned to the children, meaning the parents, and said, we want to hear your question. Boy, did they ask questions. The first was a Zinnier. Can you please explain to me why 6 million Jews perish? How do you start? How do you answer that question? Right? They didn't come unprepared. They came prepared to challenge us to make these things through. And by the end of the Seder, everybody was crying. I mean, everybody was crying. We were crying because we listened to the pain that our parents and grandparents were doing. They were crying because we were there and they had survived long enough to bring children. I mean, all the levels of crying. They listened to their children, like all groups of children. Some who were wise children, some were wicked children, some were simple children, some were going on. And we saw all of it playing out in front of us. Most importantly, we cried because Am Yisrael died. Because the Jewish people are still alive after all these years, doing the same Meshivia kind of concept of having a Seder in whatever iteration it's not in, but it's still happening. And that makes us pause for a moment and cry, hopefully with joy. But by the same token, we also know that what? Last year, somebody came to me, somebody I love very much, and said, there's somebody in town, I don't know which artist it was, great musician, and had the concert on the first night of Pesach. Right? And say again? Springsteen. Oh, so yeah, okay, and I happen to like Bruce, you know. And it's almost Jewish, you know, like Bruce Springsteen playing on yesterday. And it upset people a lot, especially of a certain generation. right? Now, they don't know what these people did, some people did say it. Some people did a Seder in Springfield. They brought stuff with them, and they made a Seder in Springfield. Give those people a lot of credit. A lot of credit, you know, maybe it's not the way I would want to say it, maybe it's not the way my Bobby wanted to say it. At least they were doing some kind of Seder and acknowledgement, I give partial credit points, you know, so let's think about what the Seder might look like for this year. Next time we get together, we'll do the third of these 2 sessions. By the way, we've not exhausted even 1/10 of the material that we can look at. But I hope that you'll come to the last session, which will be next week. And please feel free to take any of the material. As I say to people, Thomas is hagonev ne'aganav patur. But if you steal from the thief, you're not culpable. So bring this material with you. Right, take it with you. And this is mostly public stuff. I added a little bit of my salt and pepper to this stuff, but bring it and use it. Okay, you don't even have to put session on there, copy it, retype it, take a picture of it, share it with the people that are there, and start a conversation around issues that are important to you. I feel like I did a lot of talking, not so much listening, and I was taught that a person has 2 ears and 1 mouth for one very simple reason. You should listen twice as much as you thought, but I think it is nice. I don't even know who's on the Zoom. Who's on the Zoom tonight? Hi. Hi, hey, how are you?
Okay.
Good, nice to see you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you, Rabbi? You doing okay?
Yep.
Good, good. You look young, Rabbi. You look like, oh, you are young, Rabbi. That's good, that's good. What is this? I got shoes older than this guy. Very good. Okay, thanks, everybody. Have a great evening. We'll see you same that time, same that channel next week. We're passing beautiful Haggadah around. Next week, if you have a Haggadah that you like, bring it, okay?